There's only so many, like, here is how you write a book, books you can read before you realize that they don't work. Hi, I'm Jodi McAlister. My new book is called An Academic Affair. It's from Atria Books Australia, brand new imprint of Simon & Schuster Australia, and it's out on June the 4th. Often when we talk about romance fiction, we tend to think about it in terms of a trope menu. This is not how I approach it as a writer, but it's a really good way to describe it, I think. So if I was going to go through the trope menu of An Academic Affair with people, I would tell them that it's about academics, they're rivals to lovers, they've been rivals for a very long time, but it's also a marriage of convenience. So what happens in this book is that Sadie and Jonah have been rivals ever since they had a fight in their first year literary studies tutorial about the Wordsworth poem To Joanna. Did I maybe also once in a first year literary studies tutorial have a fight with someone about To Joanna that I'm still salty about to this day? Like, maybe, who could say? So this rivalry has extended through their whole undergraduate careers. They both went on to do PhDs. They were rivals all through that as well. Same department, different supervisors. They're working on different topics, but because they're in the same department, they're competing for all the same teaching opportunities and funding. Then they graduate their PhDs. They're still rivals, except now they don't have PhD scholarships anymore, so they're both broke, competing for the same teaching, the same grant opportunities, but now the stakes are really, really high. And because PhD scholarships are low, wages are really low for junior academics, they've been living in the same share house for a big chunk of this time as well. Like a big share house with a lot of people, but still same place. After 15 years of this, they finally decide to call a truce. They're like, look, we're 32 years old. Can we be adults about this? Like, this is really childish. This has gone on for so long. And then the very next day, a permanent academic job is listed. And these are incredibly rare. The year I got my own permanent academic job, only 5 were listed in the whole country. So this is really, really high stakes. One of them gets the job. I won't spoil which one. But then they realize that the contract has a provision for partner hire. So they can both have this job, but they will have to get married. Because to do this, they would have to sign a stat dec. They don't want to lie and say they're dating when they're not, because you can go to jail if you lie on a stat dec. So, but if they say we have lived together for several years and recently got married, it's all true. So they moved to Tasmania to take up this job. My very first academic job was also in Tasmania, so this is a world I know very well. And then it's a romance novel, so I wonder what could possibly happen next. There are 2 other kind of big things, I think, going on in this book. One is obviously the commentary on what it means to be an academic, what academia is like, how the university is a brutal neoliberal institution that will never love you back. Like, this is dark academia where the dark is rampant exploitation and, staff being treated terribly and finances being prioritized over student experience. Definitely, I know nothing about from working in this sector for a long, long time. I have no feelings about this whatsoever. So this is not a book where the university is necessarily romanticized, although that notion of being a scholar, of studying is still so important to Sadie and Jonah, and it's not something that they're ever really prepared to let go of. They've still got that idealism in their heart somewhere. But the other thing this book is about siblings. So Jonah has a sister named Fiona, who has recently, her husband has just left her, so she's all on her own. She lives in Tasmania, so this is a big motivation for Jonah to want this job in particular. Sadie was just about raised by her sister, Chess, short for Francesca. And so she's in this position where she's in her 30s now, but her older sister still is like taking care of her all the time, and she really loves it, but she also resents it. And so it's working out what sibling relationships look like once you're not kids anymore, once you're all adults, and how kind of difficult it can be to have siblings sometimes. Those can be really complicated relationships. I am an academic myself. I specialize in popular romance studies, so like romance novels, that's something I study as well as something that I write. So I've experienced quite a lot of genre snobbery in my academic career as well as my authorial career. A lot of people, often men, turning their noses up at it and really assuming that if you've read one romance novel, you've read them all, that romance novels are all the same, that nothing bad ever happens in a romance novel, that there's nothing meaningful that they can ever possibly say. And I have a few things to say back to that. One of them is everyone dreams of love. It doesn't have to be romantic love, but love is something that is really, really important to everyone, to all of us. So why so quick to poo-poo something which really centers on love? But romance also centers other emotions, other affective experiences, hope, joy, comfort. And I don't think it is an accident that during sort of lockdown seasons in 2020, 2021, sales of romance really, really climbed. The great promise of romance is that everything will turn out all right in the end. And in a period characterized by enormous uncertainty, why wouldn't we gravitate towards that promise? Romance can tell us so much about the world, as can other forms of genre fiction. And to scholars who turn their nose up at them because they're like, ugh, not real literature or whatever, why wouldn't you care about the books that people genuinely really love to read? Because these books are doing something. They're saying something. They're not just like in one ear and out the other. They're scratching a real itch. Let's interrogate what the itch is. This is actually my 8th novel. It's my 4th as an adult writer. So before I wrote these novels that I write for Simon & Schuster, I wrote 3 young adults, sort of paranormal romance, urban fantasy. We would probably call them romantasy now, but that term did not exist in the wilderness of 2017 to 2019. I'm still very proud of those books. They're about sort of scary fairies and the smart girls who are against their will slightly in love with them. Very kind of speaking back to the Twilight tradition in some ways, more than to say the Sarah J. Maas tradition of paranormal young adults. Then I published another book in 2022 called Libby Lawrence is Good at Pretending, which is also young adult but targeted slightly higher. The characters are in university, not scholars this time, they're students, and they're in campus theatre, and they're putting on a performance of Much Ado About Nothing, which is a play that has informed a lot of my work. It's certainly an academic affair as well. That's actually the first book I ever wrote. I wrote the first draft of it when I was 20. I rewrote it 4 times. It took me 15 years to publish it, and we finally got there. I think that was the book I talked to you about last time, actually. We talked about Libby Lawrence. And then 2 months later, my adult debut came out. So my first 3 books were a trilogy. First 3 books as an adult writer were another trilogy, the Marry Me Juliet trilogy, Here for the Right Reasons, Can I Steal You for a Second, and Not Here to Make Friends. They're all set on the same season of a reality TV show, which very strongly resembles The Bachelor. It's not called The Bachelor because I don't want to get sued, but what could it possibly be? And another thing I've researched a great deal about in my academic life is The Bachelor and romance reality and romantic reality TV, because I'm really interested in the stories we tell about love and what love actually looks like. And so it's a really interesting place to explore the collision of narrative and the real. So these 3 books all take place concurrently. You can technically read them in any order or read them as standalones, but I think they really work well as a set, read in order. The first one, Here for the Right Reasons, is a romance between the bachelor, essentially, and a contestant he eliminates on the first night. The second one is a romance between 2 contestants who fall in love with each other instead of the bachelor. And the third one, Not Here to Make Friends, is a romance between the seasoned villain and her producer. So we've got 3 very different love stories all taking place at the same time. And it's kind of like a puzzle box. If you read them together, they unlock a little bit further. And very eagle-eyed readers will notice that there are a couple of characters in the deep background of Not Here to Make Friends who also pop up in an academic affair. You don't need to know this, but like it's a fun little Easter egg if you do notice it. I am a full-time academic, but my job title is Senior Lecturer in Writing, Literature and Culture at Deakin University. I work half and half across creative writing and literary studies. So I'm also writing academic books. I've published 3. I've got 2 more coming out in 2026. It's busy research season for me. But I can do a little bit of creative writing on my work time as well. So instead of having 2 totally disparate jobs, I sort of have 1.5 to 1 3/4. They reinforce each other really well. Obviously, researching popular culture, researching popular romance in particular, and then writing it puts me in a really good position to, in both senses, know what I'm doing. I think having a really good grasp of sort of the theory and some of the cultural things going on makes me a better romance writer, but understanding the practice of writing makes me a much, much better scholar as well, because sometimes that that labor gets a little bit undersold. We focus so much on the text and we neglect the process of writing and also the process of reading. And this is something I can talk about for a really long time. I will stop talking about it now. We'll be here for about 9 hours. But yeah, so I do both. I work very, very hard, but I would never give one of them up, I don't think. They go together for me, and I would be worse at both of them if I wasn't doing the other. I think a really important thing most writers will tell you is you've got to understand how your own brain works. There's only so many, like, here is how you write a book, books you can read before you realize that they don't work because everyone's process is different. So for me, what works is writing in the early, early morning. So I often say that I start the day very smart and I end up not particularly clever. It's a slow process of decline over the course of the day. So I usually get up at about 5. I'm at my computer by about 6, and I will do creative writing in the morning. I will keep plugging away at that till at least 8:30, usually more like 9:30. I have to write at least 1,000 words or I feel bad. Like, I'm very motivated by guilt. And then my academic workday begins. I'm doing a lot of writing at the moment, and what I've discovered is I can't just like flick back and forth between the two. There needs to be quite a clear break for me. So if I start creative, I can continue creative all day, but as soon as I switch over to scholarship, I can't go back. So there's usually a bright line for me in sort of between 9 and 10 in the morning, and then we go about the rest of the day. And then I finish at 5. And I don't write at night ever. I'm really bad at that, like horrible at it. What have we got here? Are you a Monopoly or a Scrabble person? Scrabble all the way. My mum and my sister and my aunt and I are very competitive when it comes to playing Scrabble, and they live in New South Wales, but whenever I go home, the Scrabble board gets pulled out and it's on. I know some families have absolutely ruined themselves playing Monopoly, and maybe it's good that we never really got into Monopoly because we're vicious at Scrabble. Story is something that is incredibly important to everyone. Even people who think they don't read care about story, because story is how we understand the world. An alternative name for humans, Homo sapiens, is Homo narrans, the storytelling man. Storytelling is, for some, what separates us from the animals, and stories are how we understand the world. So an example I like to use sometimes, quite pertinent to an academic affair actually, is the story we tell about going to university. Like, you go to university, you study hard, you do your degree, and then you get a good job. And then sometimes when maybe that doesn't happen, people feel betrayed because they've really internalized this narrative. Another one that is really important to us, very relevant to romance, is the love story. We've got an idea of what that should look like. You meet someone, you like them, you kiss, you get together, you get married, you have children, and then when people break up, when that story gets cut off, you find that they talk about it in really narrative terms. They're like, "Oh, I have to go back to the beginning. Oh, that's the end of that chapter. I have to start a new chapter." It's the language of books. And so even for people who don't read, I think writers are incredibly important because we are the people who are engaging with those stories on a creative level. We're finding new ways to tell stories, to get them out into the world, and perhaps providing some new ways for people to think about their lives. And whether or not people read them, it'll filter through to them eventually. I love to read what I write. I think this is probably not a, a groundbreaking answer. I think if you are not reading what you write, you are doing your job pretty badly. So I'm reading a lot of contemporary rom-com, but what I stay away from are things that engage directly with what I'm writing about. So when I was writing the Marry Me Juliet trilogy, I was like, I'll read contemporary romance all day long, but I'm not going to read other reality TV books. Currently, I'm like, no, I will not read other academic books. Also, like, as an academic, I have some feelings about some of the inaccurate ways academia is represented, so I will not call anyone out specifically because I am polite. Obviously, I'm reading a great deal of scholarship at the moment because I'm working on 2 different academic books. One of them, which we've just has just been signed off by the publisher, it's gone into press, is about Bonkbusters, the fabulous, glamorous 80s books by authors like Jackie Collins, Julie Cooper, Shirley Conran, and Judith Krantz. So I've spent the last 18 months just like living in the 80s. I read all 10 of Judith Krantz's books back to back, and that rewired my brain in a little bit of a troubling way there for a while. I can also say Collins Cooper Conran Krantz unbelievably fast now because of that project, but that's where I've been living for the last little while. Is I've been living in the world of the 80s. And then the next academic book I'm working on with Athena Bellis, the blockbuster book, is with Dr. Amy Burge. But my new academic book is about audio erotica. So I've been reading a lot of really dense academic scholarship about sound and the power of the human voice, but also listening to quite a lot of erotica because that's my job now. The author who has been like incredibly important to me, probably the most important author in my career, it was the moment when I was like, oh, I love reading and maybe I also want to write one day, is Isabel Carmody. So, a wonderful Australian author, Isabel Carmody. I had the great honor of hosting a launch for her a few weeks ago, and I was like, oh, this feels like a real full circle moment. But I picked up her book, Over Newton, when I was 9, and it was just like a huge game changer to me. And I realized not that long ago, honestly, that like for those of you who are not familiar with this series, it's set in a sort of post-apocalyptic, post-nuclear world where people, as a result of this kind of nuclear event, some people have developed special abilities, but these are relentlessly persecuted. And anyone who is discovered to be a little bit outside of the norm is sent off to this like icy mountain fortress called Ober-Newton. But they eventually sort of team up and take it over for themselves, and it becomes the platonic ideal of the university. And I was like, is that where that came from? Is that why I wanted to be a scholar? Did I want to do Ober-Newton? I don't know that's the whole of the story, but it's certainly some of it. So she's a hugely important author to me. I've been reading her my entire life. I will read her for the entire rest of my life. I read everything she writes religiously, even when I'm not playing in that particular genre sandpit at that moment. In terms of romance, though, the author that really made me alive to what romance could do and made me be like, oh, I would love to write a romantic comedy, like particularly a proper funny romantic comedy. Like the comedy in romantic comedy, we can often think of as comedy in the Shakespearean sense. Like it's got a happy ending, not necessarily that it's funny, but also I love it to be funny. And so the author that really was like, I was like, oh God, this rules. This is so good, is Jennifer Crusie, who is an American romance author. Her books have this wonderful kind of screwball characteristic to them. My absolute favorite one, if people need a starting point, is called Welcome to Temptation, where the hero is the mayor of a small, quite conservative town, and the heroine is an accidental pornographer. And it is incredibly funny, but also really emotional and romantic. And just the way she paces her books, they just rip along. You get the feeling of watching like an old movie, like that real kind of almost pre-Hays Code sometimes, just like ripping along screwball comedy. Great, great, great. I love her work so much. And she has not published for a very long time, but she's just got a new book out now. And I'm like, oh, my goodness, I've been saving it. It's my break glass in case of emergency book. Like when I finish writing this book, that's the little treat I'm going to allow myself. Next for me is the sequel to An Academic Affair. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this yet, but I will. It's going to be called A Study in Sparkling. So 2026 should be a pretty big book year for me because I'll have that book, but also these 2 academic books I'm working on. The Monkbuster, Women's Popular Reading in the Long 1980s by me and Amy Burge, and Audio Erotica, we haven't thought of the subtitle yet, by me and Dr. Athena Bellis. So that is what is next for me. I'm also quietly, because A Study in Sparkling is so much about wine, doing a little bit of sommelier training on the side because I simply cannot stop studying. Absolutely my pleasure. I will come back whenever you like.